there, everybody. Julija Simas here, Agent 12 for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. Thank you for joining me today at the brink of eclipse season of 2021 with our first eclipse looming tomorrow, a lunar eclipse at 5 degrees, 26 minutes of Sagittarius. So for some of us, that means a lot more in the sense of it's highlighting something particular in our chart, or it's got a connection to the cycle of eclipses that we're actually in at the moment. So I'm here to actually share with you a little bit of, well, what we can sort of help you along with to understand eclipses and not be scared of them. They are an incredibly potent energy as the sun, moon, and earth come together in this quite magical syzygy, as we call it. And that's what I'd like to focus on today, because when we understand the mechanics behind it, we can be much more involved with, being part of it. And as things sort of come up for us during this time, we're a lot more naturally connected to dealing with them. As opposed to, the question we always get asked is, what's going to happen? Well, you're already in it. We're only a day away from the eclipse. Eclipse season start about 2 weeks, before, because we're in the full moon eclipse tomorrow. And 2 weeks ago, it wasn't an eclipse, but we're already coming into that season. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to have the solar eclipse. And, at least another 2 weeks after that, we've got this, 6-week period that we're in. And even longer for eclipses. Eclipses come every 6 months. So we have, a culmination of months prior and months after that relate to this particular time. So for some of us, this won't be as clear, like at the, right now, like what do these eclipses mean to me? So astrologically, we've got a better inroad because, what does it mean to me where 5 degrees of Sagittarius is? Right? Or 5 degrees of Gemini as the opposition where the sun is. So, in what polarity or in what houses does that polarity sit for you in your astrology chart? Of course, if it's in the first house, it's going to be first house Sagittarius in that sense, because that's where the illumination of the lunation is. You might be very much paying a lot of attention to not being, let's say, wanting to be much more of, a proud and vibrant personality, as opposed to like, I've been hiding in the shadows or I've got something to come out with, right? So South Node eclipses have a lot to do with the gathering of resources for ourselves. What we've been, kind of, let's say, keeping in our dragon's tail and maybe not utilizing. Maybe being too scared to sort of come out with our goods, so to speak. So there's many ways to look at that. If it's happening in the opposite house, Sagittarius in the 7th house, for example, we are connecting to other people with that resource. Okay, so maybe, connecting on some kind of a partnership way, and if it is that type of thing, we might be a little bit concerned, like, is this the right partnership? Is this the right person for me? And we won't know until the weeks pass by. Okay, so not everything things are illuminated at this point, but not everything comes into, let's say, being. And that's exactly what the eclipse portal is all about. To shift our direction somewhat, not immediately, but over this time frame. Okay, so now I was going to be joined by Olga Morales, and I'm hoping she can still join me. But something's come up with her, the South Node, the eclipse on her South Node. So we're hoping that she will join me. But if not, you're just stuck with me for today, as it's too late to sort of gather another agent at this time. So I hope you're all doing well out there. I'm just, what's the word? Have this new system going on with StreamYard, so it's all a bit new to me, but it's great to see Deb and Greg, a couple of agents, Anya from up north. How cool to see you all. Mary, Cindy, some of the names I do recognize, otherwise I don't. So yes, I will be missing Olga, but you never know, she might surprise us and still turn up. So it's good to see the chat. Yeah. So how are you all going anyway during eclipse time? You freaking out, or you kind of riding through it? I think if you're following astrology, you know how to ride the dragon a bit better. Yeah. Well, I want to talk a bit about the dragons because they're quite, what do you call it, inspirational, I think, to me, to think about eclipses as dragons and so on. So let me share my screen. Emotional stuff coming up, and of course a lunar eclipse is very much related to the emotional surfacing, or being coming out to complete fruition, of course. So now oops, hang on. Sorry, I'm going to stop that because it didn't quite work. What did I do? Share screen. Window. There we go. Here it is. Okay. So I have to do my full screen, and I'll try and check in with the chat here and there because it overtakes my screen. So yeah, so sorry, we're missing Olga for now, but let's hope she turns up by the time I finish. We were going to do it in two parts, me going first and then following with her. But we will be back in 2 weeks anyway. I'm concentrating on the lunar eclipse today, and we will look at the solar eclipse in 2 weeks' time, okay? Because they are a bit of a different energy, but of course, it's eclipse season, so we're gathering the lunar and the solar together in this whole kind of season. But, as most of us know, the sun, moon, earth coming together in a lineup over eclipse season is what makes this time incredibly magical. It makes us very much fit into the idea that, we are living in this tremendously wondrous cosmos. And our place on earth is so incredibly aligned with the sun and moon and their syzygy at the time. So, as we see the sun and moon come together, especially for a lunar eclipse and then a solar eclipse, well, for both, we see the incredible sacred geometry of the Vesica Pisces, as it begins, okay? So it doesn't matter where in the circle it begins, we've got the incredibly, wonderful ancient symbol of Vesica Pisces, which is a symbol of creation, of beginnings and endings, and of course the beginning of the flower of life that then continues infinitely. So, this is perhaps more true of a solar eclipse, but of course a lunar eclipse, the lines of the circles coming together aren't so dynamic. It's a little bit more blurred, but it's still, of course, happening. So, it's the connection of the solar rational mind and the lunar unconscious feeling self, soul and spirit coming together for all of us. And no wonder, we're sort of challenged or put on the spot to actually rebalance that somehow in our lives. If we've gone way too far on one side, the rational stream, or way too far on the unconscious stream, then we want to sort of rebalance that in our lives during eclipse time. And it's often called the kind of eye in the sky, or the portal, or the portal that we move through at these times, the dragon hole, the hole to heaven. Again, more true for a solar eclipse. But, again, you can see it, the earth plays a very big role in a lunar eclipse because it's the earth's shadow that shadows the moon for a period of time or hours. And of course, it's only from earth that we see that. So, again, it is our spiritual connection to the cosmos that is really very, very real at this time. It's not some kind of mumbo jumbo that people can't understand of, why astrologers talk about this eclipse, eclipses, because they're visible. It's cloudy here in Melbourne, which is a real shame. And I think it's going to be raining for the next 3 days. So we won't see this eclipse. Even though it is nighttime here. So keep an eye on that, because, if you can sit under an eclipse and just watch it sort of form and move through the process and meditate through that time, incredibly potent energy that you can be part of. And even if you can't see it, or it's daytime, of course, where you are, then, sit in this time frame and face, Gemini Bread always says, face the direction of the eclipse, wherever it is in the world, to get much more connected to that. So, of course, the sun is the spirit, the purpose, the guiding sort of principle of life, and the motivation behind what we do. And the moon brings up all the soul memories, the essence of things, that feeling side of us that has, is of course always lived as well. And then the earth shows how that soul and spirit manifest together for us on the planet, personally and collectively. So, potent times for collective intentions as well. With the state of the world, and, wouldn't we love to see more of that happening? I know that, through the work of many astrologers and many more, spiritually guided people, eclipses have become, very important. So we can see them as these turning points on a collective level, which I think we'd love to see more of, if you know what I mean. So hang on, what's going on here? Just checking that this is playing. Sorry, one sec, guys. When you're on your own, you've got to do many things. And then this, this incredible diagram that shows us that, this syzygy and this symmetry and this perfect sacred geometry that we are part of, as the earth, as the sun contains 108 earths. The distance between the sun and the earth is 108 suns. There's 108 moons distance from the earth to the moon. And, this, of course, the perfect symmetry reflected in the number 108, which, if you get into the sacred geometry of all of it, it really puts astrology, or the way that astrologers look at eclipses, as very much part of the wonders, again, of the cosmos. So, a good time to really sort of, put astrology out there as well, I think, because it's not just, made up mumbo jumbo, that a lot of people might think. So let's have a look at what eclipses mean in the ancient Greek. It's about abandonment. They often do have a very negative connotation, because also the ancients, even before the Greeks, thought of, eclipses, the dragon eating the moon, or the dragon eating the sun. So they were always, very, very sort of off-putting, oh my God, eclipses are coming, what's going to happen? Again, but if we're very conscious of the mechanics of what is happening during eclipse time, are we as fearful as we were, thousands of years ago? I don't think so. But again, things do happen during eclipses, often for the better. In most cases, of course, there's a lot of perhaps letting go and things changing during this time. That is life. It does remind us that we are in this cycle and web of life that has to, let's be upgraded, updated all the time. It's about letting go, and it's about moving forward all at once. So there's an occultation going on at some level. The solar eclipse, of course, the moon hides behind the sun. The moon hides the sun, and at a lunar eclipse, the Earth's shadow goes over the moon. So we have this blocking and unblocking of conscious and unconscious energy, depending if the moon's blocked or the sun's blocked. And so it's a reversal of, in a sense, what the sun would represent and what the moon would represent, we're actually getting to look at the moon from more of a solar perspective, and we're getting to look at the sun from a more emotionally moony perspective. So this is that reversal. You know, the sun becomes the moon and they reverse, so we get the other inside. Okay, so we can see things that we don't usually see. We can move through things that we won't usually move through, like a portal. Okay, so, you know, as I said before, the lunar and solar eclipses happen in seasons, 6 months apart. So twice a year we get the seasons of eclipses, and the last season was last December. Many of you know that are studying astrology, of course, it's when the sun and the moon connect at the lunar north and south nodes. And the moon and sun coming together would be a solar eclipse, and opposite each other on the nodes would be a lunar eclipse, is what we have happening. And that's why, you know, eclipses only happen when the syzygy comes together at these nodes. And of course, the nodes are known as the dragon's head and the dragon's tail, Rahu and Ketu, Caput Draconis, you know, making that, you know, connection to the draconic year and the dragons that are represented by the lunar node. So the eclipses are like, we have to cross the dragon somehow, okay? We have to cross through the dragons, you know, in front of the dragon's cave. Some of us might have to go into the dragon's cave. Some of us might have to fight the dragon at this time. And there's, of course, many different levels, but never expect the worst. So what does it mean for us to actually confront the dragon? It's the hero's journey, the sun's journey through this time, where he's to confront his fears and his emotions, and or hers, sorry, I shouldn't say heroines as well. To move through this cycle, okay, or to get past and, in a sense, free oneself, liberate oneself in order to be able to move more freely. Yeah, okay. So I'm not going to get into this too much because this is more advanced, but eclipses happen in seasons. They can happen as part of what we call a Saros family or part of a Metonic cycle. So the Saros cycles are all about the eclipse having a number. So this eclipse tomorrow, the lunar eclipse, is Saros number 121. And it happened back in 2003, and it happens every 18 years as part of a family. And these Saros families last for thousands of years, or about 1,000 years is the normal. So this cycle actually began in 1047. And it's always really interesting to look up the cycle that the Saros began in. But just so you know that, yeah, these cycles are very much connected to a big pattern. Okay, so finding the Saros cycle that you were born into is always very intriguing. We have some classes on that at the CIA. I'm not going into that right now. And then every eclipse is also part of a Metonic cycle. And a Metonic cycle happens every 19 years. So we've got kind of 2 series of eclipses happening for every eclipse of an 18-19 year cycle. And what's in the middle of that? The 18.6 year draconic cycle of the nodes. Okay, so you know that kind of helps us make a lot more sense about, you know, every eclipse on the nodes, of course, and how they're connected to the moon and the sun. And of course, those of you that do tarot cards will know that the moon and the sun are, of course, the representation of card number 18 and 19 in the tarot. So you know, again, how potent this time frame is for us, being the draconic cycle, being illuminated big time by the sun and the moon. Yeah, and then, you know, we then can see that dragon a lot more clearer. Okay, so even in, of course, there's a lot of work done with the nodes in astrology, and most of you would know your own nodal axis. You would know that, how potent they are as the rulers of your nodes and so on. But for this eclipse, we've got the ruler of Jupiter for the south node, and it's squaring this eclipse. So Jupiter's seriously important in this eclipse coming tomorrow. So you'd want to look where the square is happening of, Jupiter at the beginning of Pisces, and also where your own Jupiter is, because Jupiter ruling the south node is representative of, well, not representative, it shows, how we believe in what we hold as resources, how we believe in what's happening, how we believe in ourselves, and how we live that. So Jupiter really responds to ourselves as a person in the world and what we do with that, okay? How big and brave and bold we are to live our truth. So as we'll see in the charts that I've got coming up, eclipses happen when they're, of course, closest to the nodes, okay? So, the sun and the moon come together every month and oppose every month as well. But if they're not near the nodes, there's no eclipse is going to happen. So the closer the eclipses happen to the nodes, of course, the more that's when we get, total eclipses to annual eclipses, and then hybrids or penumbral eclipses, depending on how far away they are from the actual node. So therefore you can see total lunar or solar eclipses are pretty potent because the syzygy is just so perfectly lined up, okay? By declination, latitude, degrees, everything comes together in that time frame. So if we just reflect a bit about the nodal axis, again in our own chart, or where these nodes are now transiting in your chart, the south node represents the constant purging of things past. If the dragon's tail gets too heavy, it won't be able to fly. That's what I always like to say. Although the dragon's tail is also full of resource and memory and things that we might need to sort of take out now and then. Okay, so it's almost like, what treasures have I forgotten to use in that, from the south node? And it's time to actually gather them now, time to illuminate them, time to, not push them back in your sort of memory, but kind of do something to manifest a lot more with that. Together they represent the constant flow of energy intake and release. So the dragon's head takes in and the dragon's tail releases. And of course, not everything needs to be released. There are some treasures, as I said. So propelling ourselves forward all the time is that sort of cyclic breath, representation of the breath as well as we move forward in our lives constantly. So again, a reminder, eclipses are so much a reminder of how we're moving or flying forward or ahead. So yeah, an ancient symbol of the eternal cycle of renewal, beginning and endings. A solar eclipse very much represents the endings and beginnings happening at once. Okay, and the lunar eclipse is much more of that sort of dragon extended to actually be, is it released? Is it flying? And the word that is very much about that cyclic, eternal, never-ending recreation of self is the Ouroboros, an ancient Egyptian an alchemical word that represents the snake eating its own tail or the dragon eating its own tail. Okay, so again, as I said, it's a representation of the nodes, but also very much a solar eclipse more so. And together, as eclipses go around the planet, eternally, like, they've happened from the beginning, or I suppose when the moon and the sun were aligned perfectly as they are now, and a representation of the snake, the creation story of the snake wrapping itself around the globe, or in this case, the egg, the cosmic egg, and then the dragon constantly circling the planet. So your connection to that, be inspired by this time, as opposed to fearful, is what I'd suggest. So often things that might sort of first of all rise up as somewhat fearful, especially at a lunar eclipse, Solar eclipses can be a lot more hidden, and we really won't understand exactly what that might be. But a lunar eclipse, illuminating something and bringing something to the foreground, at first might seem to be, oh my God, surprising, but just kind of trust it and see where that takes you. It can be incredibly an amazing moment and time frame. So, talking about and thinking about dragons, moving through or around the planet, this is just kind of a haphazard way that we see all the different eclipses, over this, I think it's 20-year time period, happening on the planet. And they're, it seems like they're very random and happening all over the place. And, there's one here and then there's one there and, and so on. This is much more a solar eclipse a graph. But when we learn more about Saros cycles, we actually and the families of eclipses that an eclipse belongs to, and you can do so much work on this on a more personal level, is that you can see patterns, like the eclipse cycles or Saros families start at either the poles, the North Pole or the South Pole. They move upward over time and get, longer, like as in total eclipses as they near the equator, and then they start dissipating out as partial eclipses and then go. But it takes thousands of years for them to go through the whole process. So again, finding the Saros cycle that you were born into and how that connects around the planet is like an exercise I would highly recommend if you're at that level of study of astrology and love eclipses. Eclipses is like a rabbit hole of information that is just so interesting. So anyway, there's more of that in all of our work on the CIA there if you want to get into it. So have a think about it. The meaning of the eclipses at this time for all of us, wherever 5 degrees 25 of Sagittarius and Gemini is for you at the moment, you want to be doing something to do with what I've got up here, so they are bringing some change, if it's apparent right now or not. There's a beginning and ending coming, in a sense, to do with the solar eclipse happening, in 2 weeks. But of course, this is very much related, as we'll see. Some kind of a turning point, again, might not be so apparent right now. They're about unlocking and uncovering or alerting one to something. They can be a gateway, tunnel, or portal, which is often used, like, okay, some of us might really go into one. They are about a shift in pattern, because if we think about eclipses, you think about the buildup of just life energy, just life, and the things that we need to sort of, again, let go of, like the dragon eating its own tail. It begins again. Believe in renewal. Believe in taking the steps forward. They're always better, right? Always, always, always. It's about cycles repeating. So again, if this eclipse is very much related to your Saros cycles, or it is on your sun, let's say, so you're looking back 18, 19 years to sort of gather what was happening for me 18, 19 years ago, through that sort of timing of 2002 and 2003. And maybe there is a pattern repeating that you don't want to do the same thing. A similar story might arise, and this is very true about any astrological cycles. A similar pattern might arise, but dealing with it in the same way is not the answer, is often not the answer. So, again, have we learnt from that? Oh, it's coming up. I should have learnt from that, and I will do something very mindfully and consciously different from that. Shining a light on situations and life patterns. So, habits that have accumulated, or things that you've just in the last few months got used to doing and thinking, why am I doing this? It's not good for me, or whatever it is. All right. Or a pattern in relationships, many kind of levels and versions of that. And so the emotional feeling moon and the solar rational purpose are really, again, that happens at full and new moons, all the time, but it's intensified. Often we're saying, it's like a microscope and a macroscope all at once with eclipses, very much highlighting that area. So this is, the first of the eclipses of this year. And as you can see, it has a Saros number. So it's the 55th eclipse of the series 121. Okay, so this is from Astro Gold, so you can put up the eclipse charts to find out. And then we've got the solar one coming up, and that is part of the Saros series 147, and it will be the 23rd eclipse in that series at 19 Gemini. And then we can see that as we go down the year and eclipses begin again at the next season, November and December, we're already moving into the Taurus zone, because the nodes will be shifting very closely after that to Taurus and Scorpio. So the eclipses, of course, the nodes move backwards in our astrology chart, and the eclipses kind of dot around those, backwards and forwards. So they can be ahead of the eclipse or behind, ahead of the nodes or behind, and then they move around that way. So again, you can always find the Saros cycle before, that an eclipse is associated with, and look back 18 and 19 years ago. Just something about the 19-year cycle, Metonic cycle, will only happen in about five sessions. It will happen at the same degree of the zodiac, so therefore the same place, whereas Saros cycles actually move 11 degrees forward every time. 11 degrees, 8 hours, and 8 hours. So they move around the planet and 11 degrees forward. Therefore, you won't find them at the same degree. So it's a little bit confusing, but again, getting to know them is a good agent thing. So this is the eclipse coming up. I've just got a 0 Aries chart there so that you can align this with your own, astrology chart. We can see that the eclipse will have the backdrop of this outer wheel here is the backdrop of the constellations. So therefore the sidereal zodiac, the one that we're seeing as in star time. And the inner chart is, of course, the tropical zodiac, which we use aligned with the 0 point of Aries beginning at the equinox, at the Aries equinox, the Aries point here. So if you're looking for the eclipse in the night sky, you will see, if you look for, you won't miss the moon. I'm just saying the Scorpio constellation, Scorpius, will be behind the moon at this time. So we can see that the moon is 5 degrees, from the node. And this is, of course, the true node, and the sun's 5 degrees. So within that frame, of course, we start getting total eclipses within the 5 degree area. And we will see later on that the other eclipse and how close it is as well. So just a few things to point out. There is Jupiter squaring the node. So where is 1 degrees of Pisces in your chart? Where is Jupiter bubbling up? Accentuating this eclipse, the mutable signs is like, oh my gosh, so much information coming through, how do I decipher that? Well, follow your truth is the story here, because the moon is on the south node. Trust in your own story. If you don't trust yourself, then of course that's a bit of a problem, and you've got to ask, what is it about myself I don't trust? Okay. Trusting yourself is always going to put you on a very much stronger step to move forward. Okay. As opposed to giving that over to others and, so on. So you've got to really, kind of scrutinize, the way you do things, I think, as well. Saturn has just moved retrograde, so he's kind of playing a potent role, and also, of course, very much aligned to the nodes at this time. We have Mercury stationing, as we know, by the next eclipse it's going to be already retrograde or goes retrograde in the next few days. So it's a stationing Mercury, giving it a really much more potent energy about what it's going to do next, right? Like over the next 3 weeks. This is really a time to alert yourself to changing your mind about something. It's a potent time to, again, change the way you do things, change the reality or the record playing in your head if it's not working. Okay. Or if, again, not working, or if you want to change it, it's connected closely to Venus. And they're both squaring Neptune. So, a stationing Mercury, squaring Neptune, Venus is there as well. It's almost like it's asking you to just give in to the flow. Again, not perhaps trying to be so much rational to work everything out at this time, but let things arise and come up, and the clarity will come. So again, trusting what you're being told, what's being brought down for you at this time, as information to guide you is really, really significant. Yeah. So the closest aspects that are happening at this time, we can see that Mars is in a square to the Sun. This is a semi-square, so it's a very potent aspect as well. And what's Mars all about? Standing up for ourselves, changing action, direction, energy. Olga was going to talk more about this, and I'm not sure if she's around yet, but we'll find out. Anyway, I'll keep going. So you can look at all the closer aspects happening at this time. Vesta is actually squaring the nodes as well, as we can see here. And what's Vesta about? Vesta is all about what we're devoted to, what we invest ourselves in. Okay, so a really highlighting with Jupiter opposite, in a sense it's a wide opposition to Jupiter, but highlighting again what we invest our time in, and it's highly a really good time to perhaps use Vesta to be around a fire during the eclipse, to meditate on the flame. Okay, to warm yourself with the flame at this time as well, to re-empower yourself. It's also making what we call the other square, the 135 square, the Sesky square to Pluto. So again, empowering ourselves with inner and divine energy. And then the aspects continue. And what's really interesting with this one too is Mars has just gone into bounds. As we know, Mars has been out of bounds for, a few months. And I think the USA astrologers were all kind of saying, oh, wow, there's been a shooting nearly every day, or some kind of, shooting in America, during this Mars out of bounds times. And it's also the USA chart, the Sibley chart that's used, has Mars out of bounds as well. So it's not surprising, but of course something big has to be done about that, hopefully at some point. Venus is going out of bounds. So Mars and Venus are kind of swapping directions. So, last week when the ceasefire was announced, between Israel and Gaza, we, of course, how long it lasts, we don't know, but Venus was on her own north node. So we kind of looking at Venus. Yes, we want the goddess to bring peace and balance and more beautiful life to many more people, or to everybody. And so for her to be going out of bounds, maybe she's got much more sort of precedence in taking charge as opposed to Mars at this time. And Mercury's out of bounds at this point too. So as you can see, planets, when they're in that Gemini, Cancer zone, or Sagittarius and Capricorn, will often be out of bounds. So that's where you look for them, because it's the extremes of the sun's point. And out of bounds is all about planets going beyond where the sun would go, okay, based from the equator. So look out for that. So that's an interesting, combo going on there. And yeah, as I said, the lunar south node, or the dragon's tail, is very much about, or, the eclipse happening at the dragon's tail is, we either have to deal with, the baggage of the past, letting go of the baggage, cutting it off somehow, dissipating it, or illuminating it and going, why have I forgotten this aspect of myself? And again, there could be some incredible rewards for many of us in that, in that dragons, in that south node as well. So there's always good there too. Okay. And I want us to remember that, because again, eclipses can often be heralded as, significantly awful or bad for us. Whereas if we move into them illuminated, we'll be much better off. So yeah, I've said all that already about the prominent sort of features of this chart. But also Venus is also on the next eclipse degree, or she's close to it. Very close. So she's very much part of, this eclipse journey for all of us as well. This is where the eclipse will be visible, of course, where it is going to be, nighttime, of course. It needs nighttime to see a lunar eclipse. And in Melbourne, Australia, it will be visible right at I think it's 9 o'clock at night here. Let's hope for clearer skies. So wherever you are, check out if you can see this particular eclipse. And on the astro map, we may look at this in more detail. It's hard to see on this screen, but you can, if you're rewatching the video, you can kind of pause this and look a bit closer. We can see Venus and where's the eclipse? The eclipse is going right through the middle of the Mediterranean there. It is rising and setting over, where are we? Over here, of course, where we saw through the middle of Malaysia. And Olga, I remember she was talking, was going to present to us how there's a lot of earthquakes and stuff already sort of popping up, and volcanoes erupting already over this eclipse season in these areas. So keep an eye on that. And if we want to look back at the last time this eclipse happened at 5 degrees of Gemini and Sagittarius, it wasn't as close an eclipse, or wasn't total, because you can see the nodes being further away. But if anyone can remember 2002, if we look back at that time, it was like we were still getting our heads around, September 11. And what kind of information were we being fed about what happened there? All the stories coming out about how the buildings fell, and you remember that time. And Pluto was on the south node. Man, that was a really big time of not trusting what was going on, and perhaps maybe not on that level, but on some level, that's reverberating for us all as well. And we had so much going on in Gemini, and and Mercury was retrograde at that one as well. This one, it's stationing. So are we moving forward with information, or are we still sort of in that sort of same pattern of not trusting what's going on completely and what we're being told? And of course, we've known that about the media and its focus, and the governments and their focus for a long time now. So anyway, you might want to look back at this chart for what was going on in your life in 2002. And then if we return to the Saros cycle, it happened 11 degrees earlier than 5 degrees of Gemini, because these are patterns that really reflect the dragon moving around the planet, okay, and through our chart. So it happened at 24 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio, and Saros cycles move forward in the zodiac. So you might want to, think about, again, just that time frame, 2003, 2002 in your own life. This is the eclipse that they actually captured Saddam Hussein, for the weapons of mass destruction. Interestingly, Scorpio and Taurus, weapons of mass destruction. Anyway, there's a lot to consider with eclipses, of course. So this is, again, just a bit of a journey into them, so you can tap into, making the most of the eclipse for yourself. And this is, the story of eclipses during that time. And we can see here that this is 121, the eclipse that happened So it happened 11 days earlier than this one, 16th of May in 2003 as the Saros, repeating this time. And of course, you can go back, if you're interested in this cycle, go back every 18 years and find all the eclipses to do with 121, if it's a meaningful one for you. And now this is the beginning of this particular eclipse cycle. I often do this work if we're looking at your own personal Saros cycle, to look at the eclipse cycle that you were born into, find its Saros number, and then find the origin of the eclipse. And I do some really interesting work with that. I'm not going to tell you what it is. But anyway, what do you call it? You need to do a class. Anyway, what am I saying? Yeah, so interestingly, this eclipse had, the origin of this eclipse was also had Mercury retrograde as well. And, you know, how that combines for us, it seems like a very healing origin. Bernadette Brady does this as well, she introduced us to this kind of method to look at the origin of the eclipse to get the flavor of any eclipse series. Okay, so the flavor of this is, you know, Neptune, Chiron, and the moon in Aries. So I think it's a deeply healing the ego kind of story here for us all somehow. You know, Aries. Then we look at the ruler of Mars, conjunct Venus. So it's about balance and connection and reconnection. And Jupiter's very strong there in Sagittarius. So again, you know, being determined to follow your own truth and harmonizing that with others, of course, with this Libra focus. So so hopefully that's giving you some good, you know, inroads to how to deal with this and look at that for now. And yeah, take this journey, you know, with kind of, you know, bravado. Where's Mars at the moment? Mars is in Cancer. He's a little bit protective, isn't he? He's quite in that sort of protective zone, and that you know tells us a lot. Of course, again, Jupiter and Mercury are the highlights of this eclipse because they are the rulers of the nodes and the moon and the sun at this time. So we've got a stationing Mercury and a Jupiter. You know, what does that mean to you? Believe your own truth, recognize how to make that work for you, decipher, you know, all the chaos and all the information that's not relevant to you moving forward. I think we can get so kind of, what's the word, especially in all this mutable energy, you know, there's just too much. There's too much information. So what's the relevant information? What's the truth that inspires you, that guides you, that makes you, you know, move ahead, as opposed to cluttering and, you know, getting that dragon's tail too heavy to fly. So again, look at the, you know, what kind of crossing point you're at. Or what kind of illumination point, you know, like don't be scared of the dragon. I know Demetra George has often sort of told the tale of, you know, the nodes, or, you know, if something's crossing the nodes in your astrology chart or transiting them. And in this case, you know, an eclipse coming together, anything to do with the nodes, it's like we're crossing through the dragon's cave, and, you know, are we tiptoeing in front of it, or are we kind of there like to fight the dragon and we're gung-ho, or, you know, are we trying to avoid the issues that are coming up? So again, the hero or the heroine and how he faces the dragon, the truth, the reality of what is going on for yourself at this time. Be very, very honest with yourself. So that's it from me. I'm going to just go into the chat now. I just wanted, before I stop sharing the screen, there's always more at the Cosmic Intelligence Agency website. Laura's written a full moon article. Cassandra's written a Jupiter in Pisces article. We have a membership that you can join, and there's much more information about eclipses, Saros, declination. There's actually about 70 videos you can access if you want to join the membership. So you can access them anytime. So do join us for more. We have webinars that you can join once off every 2 weeks. We just had one with Andrew Smith last night, so there won't be another for 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, we had Time Lord technique with Stephanie Johnson. So, really, really a lot of information and learning that you can do with the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, the agents, myself, and, follow us in that sense. So I'm going to stop my share. Oh, and how exciting, because Olga's here. Hang on. Hey, Olga, welcome.
Hi.
Oh, I'm glad whatever was going on, I'm glad it's okay.
It's all about the dragon's tail.
It's all about the dragon's tail, right? Interesting. So how wonderful. I'll read I'll check into the comments while. Look, let me just introduce Olga Morales, Agent 33. She is a supersonic astrologer, been doing it for many years. And if you've been following our cosmic transmissions, Olga's always got some extra information that you're not going to hear anywhere else because she's an avid researcher. So thank you, Olga. Over to you, because you're going to add some extra bits to what I've just talked about. Excellent.
Okay,
thank you.
Let me share my screen.
Here we go. It's coming up. It's very windy. Here we go. Excellent.
Where am I?
We're getting a fractal.
What? There's our eclipse vortex.
Yeah, that's the vortex where we're entering, everyone. Here we go. So play the show, like put the full screen on.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
Can you see that now?
Yep. Excellent. Thanks. Thanks, Olga.
Okay. So Jules has done a lot of intros. I'm not going to go over too much about. I don't want to repeat what you've said, but this is basically the eclipse, the lunar eclipse we're going to experience tomorrow. And we in Melbourne should be able to see it, but obviously we've got clouds, so it's probably not going to happen. But these are where all over the world you'll be able to see aspects of it and what it will look like. So it's called a blood moon because it's basically also a supermoon. So this is the fact that it's a supermoon and a lunar eclipse, which, for those two things to come together is not as regular as you would think. Okay, so it's a big deal to have. So a supermoon is when the moons are closest it is to the Earth, and it looks huge, and it also has a greater impact on us down here on many levels. Like it makes the tides a lot higher. And it pulls the Earth, the pull on the Earth is a lot stronger. So when these happen, a lot of the time we experience, having a double whammy like that, we experience more earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, and also very weird weather, like freaky weather patterns. So we'll see more of that. But it's also, as Jules said, the eclipses just don't happen on the day. There's a build-up to them, and usually 2 to 3 weeks before an eclipse. But also, eclipses can start being felt 6 months before. When you do GAN's work, we have to look at 6 months before an eclipse happens. So that's 90 days, and 90 days after. And pretty much, there's always an eclipse happening when you're studying eclipses. So what I wanted to look at, a little bit different to what Jules has done, I've been bringing in all the decans and the fixed stars, which have given us so much information. I don't want to stop doing it. So this one led me on another pathway of research, because the eclipse, so we got the lunar eclipse across here. I've put it rising. So we've got the eclipse of the moon in Sagittarius, 5 degrees, and on the opposite side is the sun at 5 degrees of Gemini. And we can see the nodal axis is 10 degrees. Okay, now there's important because, as Jules said, eclipses can only happen when they're close enough to the nodes, and it's usually has to be less than 18 degrees. So we always get this 18, 19, anything to do with eclipses and the solar lunar cycle. But you can see that if we look at the decans that the eclipse is in, it's in the decan of Sagittarius, is ruled by Mercury. and the first decan of Gemini is ruled by Jupiter. Now they're in opposition here, so the two rulers in terms of the decans are in opposite. So there's a duality with this this eclipse, definite duality. And also, what I've looked at here is that the fixed star that is connected to this eclipse, the moon, is called ACRAB, and it's in the head of the Scorpion. Okay, it's also sometimes called Grapheus in some books. It's got the energy of a Mars-Saturn energy. Okay, and apparently the Kabbalists would say that this is connected to the 16th tarot card, which is the Tower. And it doesn't get a good rap. It causes extreme malevolence, crime, theft, pestilence, and contagious diseases. Now, that caught my attention because when I've been researching the fixed stars, there's only 2 fixed stars that come up with contagious diseases, and they're both in Scorpio. It always gets a bad rap anyway. It's Antares and ACRAB. So it's the heart of the dragon and the head of talking about dragons. The heart of the Scorpion and the head of the Scorpion are related with contagious diseases. Now, of course, that made me want to do more research about that. But before I go on, can you see that the ruler, as Jules said, the ruler of the moon, as the lunar eclipse, because it's in Sagittarius, is Pisces, is Jupiter. Okay, or Neptune, depending if you. No, it's not. Sorry, I'm getting confused myself. I was thinking of the Neptune because Neptune's in Pisces, and that's the other ruler of Pisces. So, but anyway, Jupiter being in Pisces is in the first decan of Pisces, but the first decan of Pisces is actually ruled by Saturn. So even though we want this expansive, people are getting very excited about Jupiter being in Pisces, in the sign that it rules, but it's also in the decan of Saturn. Now these decans have been working fantastic when we look at interpretation. So it hasn't been as expansive as probably people would anticipate, especially when it comes to the stock market. And I'll show that in a while. But I think once we moves into the second decan of Pisces, which will be after it gets into 11 degrees of Pisces, it will be ruled by Jupiter. So that should be more expansive. That's going to be an interesting to look at. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out is that the nodes, they're highlighting 2 of the main fixed stars that were called the royal stars, the Persian royal stars, and one is Antares and the other one is Aldebaran. Okay, in the Taurus, the bull of the the eye of the bull.
Eye of the bull.
Oh no, I'm talking like an idiot. Sorry. Anyway, and the one at the bottom here is Fomalhaut, which is the mouth of the fish. So 3 of the 4 royal stars are actually highlighted by this eclipse. The only one missing is Regulus up here. So we don't have something there. But the fact that these royal stars with the nodes, I think that's really important on a global sort of level. So it's interesting. So let's have a look at more. Yeah. Now what I did was, because of declination, when we're dealing with fixed stars, it's not just their conjunction or opposition in in longitude. I really love working with declination because I feel that is. I've been told by a lot of older astrologers that I know that declination is a lot more powerful than longitudes, right? So what I did was I actually plotted I've got A here. So that A is actually ACRAB or Beta Scorpio, which is in longitude, it's 3 degrees of Sagittarius, but in declination at the moment, because that change over time, is 19 South 51. Okay, so that black line is this star in declination. So I wanted to have a look, about the contagious diseases element because of COVID and what we've experienced, and the fact that we've had all these planets in southern declination. Obviously, this is going to be activated. This star and Antares too. I haven't put Antares in here. They're both going to be activated when we've got these planets in southern declination. So we've had Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto all in southern declination, but we've also had Mars. It was interesting. that like the first time I remember hearing about COVID in Australia anyway was in January, and we had all the ships coming back, the cruise ships, and people already had it, and then I was in Egypt when it was sort of taking hold, and this is the time that we're down here when Mars was out of bounds. But then once Mars, so it hit it there, so it activated it, then out of bounds a bit, and then it went through again. Now this would have been in April when it hit that parallel. These are parallels, the star as well, but we can see that the eclipses that we've had. Well, this one last year was pretty much, a few degrees away. Now, when you're working with these, you can leave quite a bit of orb as well. They, like with stars, what I've learnt is that the ancients weren't so concerned that it was 1 degree away. It was observational astrology, or astronomy, if you want to call it that. So they did give quite a bit of orb when they're studying the stars. So we can't be too anal about the orb that we use for them. We have to be a little bit liberal there. So we've still got, these, if you look at Jupiter coming through here, that's the faint grey line. You can see that and Saturn, once again, they hit the star at the end of December. Okay, and then we had the eclipse when they formed a conjunction at 0 degrees of Aquarius. They were also not far away from crossing this star again. And here I've got it here when they did. Okay, so this is like, COVID again. We got more, I suppose a second, third wave. You can see how, in essence, these stars are being parallel and activating that point again. Now they're slowly, the outer planets are slowly, like Jupiter, Saturn, are moving away. You can see them moving away from the star, from ACRAB, and Mars is obviously contraparallel, so it's on the other side. But tomorrow, the eclipse that we're experiencing is parallel this star. And so I find that amazing because, like we could look back, and I have, when planets are in southern declination, and I did a whole video on this prior, like 2 years prior to the COVID outbreak, because I look back to the bubonic plague. That's another time when we had all these planets in southern declination, and obviously they would have hit this this star. Now, what I want to look, are we going to get free of COVID, and when? I'm trying to make a judgment here, and what I believe is that because Jupiter and Saturn have moved away, but obviously Pluto, which is this line here, he's going to stay pretty much there for a while, but the other faster moving planets are slowly moving away. But you can see Saturn slowly coming back here in October, getting close enough to say, yeah, well, that's a parallel in my view. And then Mars will cross again in December, and we're going to have obviously another solar eclipse there, in the same zone, not exactly parallel to it. But if we go to the 2022, you can see Mars again will be crossing the star here. Sorry, here. But as I said, the other planets are moving quite away from it. And the other thing I'm worried about, well, I'm not concerned about, I just think in terms of timing, when we might see relief from this contagious disease is when the eclipses are no longer in parallel to it. And we'll have still one in May that will be parallel. There will still be a full moon parallel to it in August. And we'll still see the faster moving planets go through in November. But see, they're going to be doing that a lot anyway, because they're going to be doing the southern and northern. But because there's no outer planet really maybe here, I'm thinking maybe by the time of August here, we might be more free of the contagious disease. But we're looking at 2022, and by then the nodes have moved out of the Gemini Sagittarius axis, and we'll be more free of it. That's what I'm sort of speculating. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the
it's
Spanish flu, just an interesting thing. The Spanish flu, and a lot of astrologers have written about it, that it happened during the Gemini Sagittarius, nodal cycle. I think it began in the Cancer Capricorn, so we're kind of mimicking that nodal cycle through that time. So, yeah.
But I did go back, Jules. I had to have a look. Not that one.
Oh, okay,
I had
good.
to go back to the Black Death because I wanted to see. So ACRAB was a little bit higher because, declination changes a little bit. But at that time, it was when Uranus was in southern declination, and it was close enough. But when it actually took hold, it actually crossed the line in 1666. I should have put another chart here. Oh, maybe I did. No, I didn't. So I should have done that. But the interesting thing was Jupiter was close enough here, and when I looked at Jupiter's there, and it got across here. So Jupiter was parallel, right? The year that the bubonic plague started taking hold. And interestingly, when I looked at the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, same thing. Jupiter was also in the southern declination, parallel to ACRAB, and so was Uranus. So it's similar to the bubonic plague. And Neptune was there as well. So isn't it interesting that Scorpio gets a bad rap? It's got this stuff about, fatality and contagious diseases, but we've got these fixed stars in these zones, and it's all to do with declination. So, the ancients knew about things.
It's not about planets crossing it in longitude. They've got to kind of, come together in declination. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So, and then Mars would have been there. So Mars always sort of brings it more to the fore, and more breakouts, I suppose, and maybe second waves. It's interesting that second and third waves have got to do with geocentric cycles because they're going to go over the same point 3 times. Right? Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah. Anyway, so that's that part.
Olga. Thanks
for that part. And then this part, I don't know if people probably maybe have never heard me. Maybe this is the first time they've heard about me and how I work. And I work a lot with midpoints and cosmobiology, and I use a 90-degree dial. And often people miss a lot of information. Astrologers miss a lot of information because they're not using midpoints. What I did was, this is on my Twitter feed. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that's my handle, astrogan33. I'm pretty prolific on there. I post a lot or tweet a lot. So I had this written this is for the eclipse for tomorrow, but I wrote this in last week. So the forthcoming lunar eclipse is a brutal one. Mars is forming an 8th harmonic aspect to the Sun Moon, and at their midpoint is the Uranus-Saturn midpoint. I've plotted this combo on the world maps. Can you see the lines going through Israel? The Sun and Moon, Mars on the MC. And then I said, keep watch for the others. Now, at the beginning of the year, well, actually December of the previous year, I always put out my OMS planetary watch. And I had a list of cities and countries that were probably going to be in the spotlight for this year. And obviously one of them I had was Jerusalem in Israel. And the reason why is you can see what I just spoke about is that this eclipse tomorrow, when you put it on the dial, everything, the first 30 degrees are the cardinal signs. The second 30 are all the fixed signs, and the last 30 are all the mutable signs. Now, anytime you see a planet come together, they either have to be conjunct, square, or opposite. Okay, anything across the dial has to be half, so it's got to be 45 degrees or 135 degrees. So they're the semi-square and the sesquiquadrant, and that's called the 8th harmonic. So the 4th harmonic is the actual dial because it's based on 90 degrees, but because we're going across the dial, it has to be half. So that's the 8th harmonic, that's at 45 degrees. So you can see this amazing pattern here, but at their midpoint is the Uranus-Saturn square, and at between 12 and 13 degrees of fixed signs. So when I saw that, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is pretty hard. And it's actually hard on me because my nodes are here and my moon is here. So, that's why I was a bit eclipsed this morning.
You're okay now, though.
It's okay right at this moment. So, Jules and I were discussing, how's this eclipse going to affect you? And I didn't feel too good this morning. So hopefully I can keep talking with nothing happening. Okay, so and so that to me is focus. That in terms of the dial and the harmonics, it's like a third dimension. Like sometimes if you're looking at two planets coming together and making an aspect, that's almost like it's two-dimensional. But once you put in the midpoints and you've got a third alignment, it's like a 3D. It's like three dimensions, and that's why I think the symmetry of it makes such an impact when we're looking at the planets. So when I put that on the world map, I don't know if you can see this very clearly, but I do zoom in. That combination, so what I've done is I've taken a lot of the noise out. I've just put the planets that are involved with this pattern that I just showed you. That's the Sun and Mars and the Moon and Mars and the Saturn, Uranus, right? And if you look at the lines, they go through Turkey. They go through Turkey as well, but they go right through Jerusalem and here, and also Tel Aviv. Like if I do the next slide to zoom in, you can see them going straight through this area. So when we do astrocartography, which is one of my passions as well, I also love to put midpoints on there, especially the ones that I know are active, because they're going to give you an area that, according to sacred geometry, if you want to look at it that way, is going to be in the spotlight. I just say these places are going to be in the spotlight. Sometimes nothing happens, but sometimes in this incident, in this situation, it just showed focus in a particular area of the world. Now, when you put it, just to emphasize this, because people get a bit confused when they're looking at the dial, but see how I've relocated the eclipse for Jerusalem, Israel, and you can see that it lines up perfectly with the ascendant midheaven of their location. So this is what's happening and what I plotted on the solar maps. So you can see the Saturn, Mars, Moon, Mars obviously going to be up here in the mutable signs, and opposite we've got the Uranus Saturn square. And this is really a difficult aspect because it brings Mars into the picture, and that brings in the violence, okay, that they've experienced there. And this was before, because it was already activated even before. There was another, the new moon previous to this was actually quite volatile as well. So that's interesting, isn't it? Astrology is amazing. I mean, and this sort of information, when I put the charts up and I make a forecast, and then you see that playing out, you're thinking, you can't make it up. I mean, it's just so amazing.
Olga, I'm just thinking you have to do a lesson on either cosmobiology or midpoints. Will you do that for us?
Yeah,
we haven't got one in our CIA yet about that, and it's.
Oh well, that's why you're lacking.
All right,
I love
it will be coming up. Stay tuned, everyone.
Okay, so I just wanted to. I know it's probably hard to see, but these are all the other places where the midpoints are highlighting. And why I put it here is because recently, as Jules was saying, one of my other passions is researching earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, because most of the time they're very close to leading up to to eclipses, because there's a big pull on our Earth, and it's sort of like the bulge stretches, and we get a stronger pull. And considering this is a supermoon, the pull's even harder. So we've already experienced in this week, leading up to this. This is what I wanted to put.
We also just had some big solar flares, didn't we? Like the C-class, 10 of them or something. Yeah.
Exactly. And like the more you look at it, those solar flares and all that solar activity is always something related to the planetary alignments. I've done a bit of work on it, and I'm extending that because I reckon I can predict when there's going to be solar flares. So that's one of my other passions. But you can see here what I've done is I've taken out all the other planets and I've just put the sun and the moon for this eclipse. And you can see that it's interesting that it's where it actually highlights. It's actually this is called the Ring of Fire. This is where most of the earthquakes and volcanoes happen, okay, volcanic eruptions. These are the Paran lines. So the Parans is where they would be square on the places where on the Earth. And interestingly, we've just had a huge volcano go through Africa and the Congo, which is just in here. Okay, and there's been one in China, like two big ones in China, but I'll put the other lines up there. See, China has actually got one going straight through in here of the midpoints. Yeah, and so and Italy too. Etna's starting to get active, and one of the parent lines is going right through it. So like it. Sorry, I should go this way. Being able to forecast where these things may occur is by using astrocartography, we can highlight certain areas that might be more likely to experience these events, okay? And especially when you see the ring of fire being activated, every time I see that combination, you just know that these sensitive areas where we already know that all the plates are there anyway, that are going to have more of a chance of something happening. Even we might see something huge going through Chile and South America too, because this is going right through there. So anyway, that's that part. Oh, that's the ring of fire. People not sure about what the ring of fire is, right? Isn't it interesting that it's highlighting that? Yeah. Okay, so, and these are the things that have already happened. I just keep a tab of them because I just know, I warn people, get ready 3 weeks before an eclipse, we're going to start seeing more eruptions and more earthquakes. And of course we do. And these are not just standard earthquakes because, we have earthquakes all the time. There's 5, 4 all the time, but I'm talking about big ones. Like this one was 6.1 and 7.3. So they're huge. And this volcano in the Congo in Africa has been dormant for 30 years apparently, and it's just come active now. So, and Etna has been spewing a bit, but it's interesting because last time we had an eclipse, it was doing the same thing, and it's come up again. So
last December.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and especially that it's a supermoon. Anyway, it's all very interesting.
Well, it's also Jupiter squaring, isn't it? Because Jupiter's such a big force, so it's pulling the sun and the moon, and it's quite dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jupiter has been shown to be related to sunspots. You know how the sunspots have got a 11-year cycle, and
Jupiter is
12, but it's in between 11 and 12. So there's there's been a lot of research.
11.8, I think.
Yeah, I know, and there's been a lot of research done on just Jupiter, the giant, and of course it's going to have the biggest impact really on the sun. Yeah. So it is amazing. And now the other biggest thing that's happened, obviously, because I look at the stock market, is the big crash with the cryptocurrencies, especially, well, actually all of them, but Bitcoin, because I follow it quite a bit. And it's basically dropped. This is a monthly chart, so I've plotted the monthly. It's actually dropped. I think it's up a bit today, but it's actually dropped below the 50% level. Now this is called a GAN box, and GAN was very much focused on sacred geometry, and this square is actually based on the Pyramid of Giza as a sacred geometry. But he always said that if there's a run, the 50% zone should be a support zone, or resistance if it's going the other way. So it's interesting that it did go a little bit lower, and at the moment it's about, I think it's, I don't know, I didn't look today, but I think it's gone up to about 35 today.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's interesting, but I want to show, yeah, I think it's 30. Oh, it's gone up to 38. So it's done a bit of a run up. Okay, so, but you can see how much
volatile, isn't it?
Yeah, very volatile. It's not for what's the faint at heart. If you like wild swings.
I mean, Elon has such an influence on what goes on there. So it's a pity we don't have a rising chart for Elon Musk. We do have his astrology. He's born a few days before Julian Assange. So they're kind of cosmic twins. So they've got a lot, they've done a lot in the world. But the Bitcoin chart that is most often used has Venus at 0 Pisces.
Yep.
And we talked about it over the time, the Pisces is such an extreme sign. It can be, either up or down. It can be, it's just so extreme. So the prediction to say, oh, it's going to be Jupiter and Venus coming together, it's going to go high. I remember saying, well, it could go really low too, because it's the extremes. We don't know. So, with Jupiter sitting around there, it's just, that Venus at 0 Pisces, it's going to be a really quite a crazy time. So just kind of don't go crazy over investing at this point.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's exactly right. And like, so what this is something. See, this is actually the new moon was it. The new moon in May, on the 11th or 12th of May, depending where you were, in Taurus. I was at 21 of Taurus, but
what's
it
this?
was
Is this that's the new moon? Sorry, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to show this is like just
Yeah.
before Bitcoin crashed, right?
Yeah.
So we could see at the time, I wrote this is from my Twitter feed. I wrote that at the time, Mercury is parallel Mars and this new moon, and they're both out of bounds. So they're both out of bounds, probably a bit unclear to see. I said this can signal issues with communication, travel, arguments, violence, road rage, travel accidents. Obviously, it's trading as well. And the Mars-Mercury midpoint was connected to Dan here again, which is what we've been looking at. Okay. And so this is sudden disputes, violence, and danger, catastrophes. So this alignment, I already knew because of what I know of my midpoints that it was going to have an impact on Bitcoin because of its some of its midpoints that were being activated by this, right?
So I mean, a lot of things aren't apparent if you're not looking at midpoints as well. Like you think,
that's what I'm saying,
I can't see a pattern here because you're not looking deep enough. Yeah.
Well, and that's why, there were a couple of people, crypto people, financial people saying, expecting, as you said, like Jupiter's coming to 0 Pisces and it's going to activate its natal Venus and it's going to be a bullish run. But no, because you can't depend on one aspect is not going to save the day.
Right. It's a synthesis of the whole story. Yeah, of course.
Like, and when I looked at that, I said, no way. They didn't look at, well, what are the midpoints involved here? What is actually happening? And so, there's no way I thought it was going to be bullish. So I put these, I alert people with these little posts that I do, and I'm telling them it's not good. Okay. And like, so because I like to, being a Scorpio, I like to make it my trading secret. What I did when I created my OMS cosmic midpoint map, or CEM I call it, it's basically I use this mostly for people. People can get their charts done, like they can see when they're going to be lucky, which is a green. The blue is when there could be some romance and some love happening, and the red is when they're going to be challenged, hard aspects, and the black is when they might get sick. Okay, so I've been using this on Bitcoin natal chart, and it works beautifully because basically it's picking up the positive and negative midpoints. Okay, so you can see without me telling people what it is. You can see that, this green part will still bullish into this period, but once the negative aspects or midpoints were being triggered, it's been coming down. And that was all to do with this eclipse tomorrow, and also the previous new moon that was activating the chart. Now, I want to give you this, I wanted to sort of show a little bit, because people are thinking we're going to be bullish soon. It has gone up a little bit, but I'm not confident that it's going to actually take off, because we still maybe it might go up a little bit and it's going to get some sort of resistance. I haven't put my Gantt lines in here, right? Because it's still got to get through this period. It's still got to get through the eclipse, because the eclipse is going to have an impact on it. And then there's going to be a break here. So after the eclipse in June, that's the 10th of June, it's not a nice aspect. There's going to be a break here, and we're going to have some nice transits. But then again, we're going to have something happening in late June. Okay. So I'm just putting it out there because we can look back at this and see if it works or not. It may not work. Okay. It's just showing you harder aspects and softer aspects occurring. It's been working really well anyway. But a lot of people putting up these, like you can trade with the moon, which you can, but you can't expect every time the pattern's going to repeat exactly. You've got to be careful because I've seen this, people saying every new moon you're going to have a high, every full moon you're going to have a low, or whatever they're saying, which is not true. You've got to be very careful because it depends on the condition of that new moon. You can't generalize because as I said, this one in particular was a very hard aspect to the natal chart of Bitcoin. So you can't make a general statement, oh yeah, it's always going to be a high on a new moon. This is what some of these immature and
stuff, guys.
Inexperienced people are posting. I get really upset about it because I'm thinking you're misleading. You're simplifying something that you can cost, people expecting these things to repeat. You're costing people a lot of money. Like they're going to fail because, like I've been doing this for a long time. There's no way I would ever generalize that comment. I mean, it's just stupid. Anyway.
Well, it's definitely a pattern, but as you said, of course, it's all to do with what else is going on.
You have to. You can't. As we know, every full moon and new moon is going to have a different vibration. We don't. How are the planets aligned with it? And how then is it aspecting the natal chart of whatever you're studying? You've got to take all of that into consideration.
Exactly. I mean, again, what you're saying, it's so true. What you listen to out there, everyone, because it can be so confusing, and then you're told something, and I mean, again, some people don't have the experience to actually say it.
Well, they actually got no experience, basically. And I just, like you can do, people will follow anybody that tells them, I don't know. It's this whole, and like with Mercury.
It's got a story of the eclipse. Who do you trust?
Jupiter, and plus, and Mercury is with Neptune too. See, I can barely talk sometimes, So, so it's
saying Olga is literally the only Twitter astrologer I trust.
Yeah, cool. Who is that? Who said that?
Casey.
Oh,
Glover,
thank you. Thank you. Love you.
Cool.
Thank you for saying that. I get a lot of nice feedback because, they can see, and like I put it out there, like I do it before time. I don't say it after the fact. And like, sometimes
33.
Sometimes I don't get it right, but that's how it is. I mean, we're forecasting, like they weather forecasts. They tell you it's going to rain tomorrow, and it doesn't. So it's probability too. And I do back it up with a lot of stuff. I do a lot of research. So anyway, okay. So we mentioned Elon Musk. I do have his. Okay, I've got his chart, but I put it on the dial. I've just did a midday chart.
Yeah.
And how it links up with Bitcoin. Okay. And this is why every time he says something or tweets something, it affects the share price, right?
Yeah, right.
So interestingly, because I've got to look at what's going on here. So you know how the Venus, so this is outside is Bitcoin. So Venus at 0 degrees of Pisces. On his Saturn Neptune, which is the worst possible combination.
Wow.
Because Saturn Neptune is the depression.
It'd have to be Venus, wouldn't it? Because that's Venus is the influencer. So how cool.
But the Saturn Neptune is of his generation. A lot of them have got that, but that's known to do with depression and sickness, right? And it's interesting because his Jupiter's nearby, so that's like the speculator's midpoint, but you've got Saturn there. So when Jupiter came around and hit this the other day, everyone, expecting it to be a bull run, he was very, very close to that time. He put out that tweet that said that Bitcoin was going to be, like it was an environmental, what is it? Because I can't say the word. Like it uses it's a threat to the environment because they use so much for mining of it in terms of resources, electricity and coal, whatever they need to do it. His tweet came out and it just went ba-boom. Right. And so it's interesting that it was hitting this part of his chart. Now, he's also got this combination here. He's Venus here, but this is Bitcoin's Uranus, which, sort of symbolizes Bitcoin because it's this, revolutionary type of currency. But so anything that hits these two, so this is an important axis for him and Bitcoin together. And so is this, because his Mars, Bitcoin's Mars, and because Bitcoin's Mars is in Cancer or Capricorn, I forget. Oh no, it has to be in Capricorn because he's a Cancerian, right?
Cancer,
Yeah. So there's this combination here. Okay. Now, interestingly, Jules, I didn't want to come up with the next eclipse, but the next eclipse, you know where it is? It's up here, 19 degrees of Gemini, right?
Okay.
So it's going to hit this here. So this is why I'm thinking.
That's his. That's Bitcoin's Uranus.
Yeah, right. But he's Venus. So this is where they're connected, right?
Right.
And across the dial is Bitcoin's Mercury, right? So this is an important axis for both of them. This is how I study synastry as well, right? So when the eclipse happens here, this is going to be activated, and all his midpoints and all these are going to be hit. This tree is going to be set off, right? So I'm thinking I don't know what he's going to come up with, but there's going to be something in the news, and
maybe there's a new coin.
I don't know, but something's going to stir it up. Like there's something new, revolutionary.
Okay.
So that's why I'm thinking we're not clear until after the next eclipse to say, that it's going to be okay. Cool. There's still going to be some surprise. There's going to be a really sudden
shocking
change.
Revelations.
That's going to change again.
Oh, I love how you can do, without a time chart, for Elon, you can still get so much information,
Well, that's why I love Cosmo. Yeah, because, you don't have to use your ascendant midheaven because obviously we don't have his time, but the midpoints are fine. I mean, maybe the moon might be off, but all the rest you can use,
right.
And you can get heaps of information. So, yeah. And then the last thing was just, I don't know, well, because of Mercury going retrograde as well, in when is it? On 30th of May, and it's already in its pre-shadow phase. There's a lot happening. We've got the eclipses, we've got a solar supermoon, we've got Mercury retrograde. I think Saturn stationed as well. So, in terms of astrology, as astrologers, we already know that May, June, we've known that from the beginning of the year is going to be an intense time.
The hot spot,
hotspot in the year for sure because of all these things that are happening. And this is what I wanted to put because you were away when the equinox happened and we didn't do our little cosmic decan thing. But it was really interesting because when I looked back at it, for the Aries ingress, Venus was also at 0 degrees of Aries, if you recall, and Mars in the second decan of Gemini. Right? Sorry, I'm getting tired. So
you've got the sun there at 21 degrees. How come 1 degree 27? What's going on there?
Oh, I must have made a mistake.
Because I just remember Venus was on Shiat. We did talk
about maybe I just did it. I must have made a mistake and put it. Okay. Anyway, maybe I did it when. Now that's a bit strange. Anyway, okay. So, but because Mars is the ruler, Mars was in Gemini, 10 degrees of Gemini. Now, what's at 10 degrees of Gemini now?
True. The
nodes. Yeah, so they're there now. But interestingly, it was obviously the fixed stars that were being activated were Aldebaran and Rigel, and in there. But transiting Mars transiting these stars is said to be associated with military matters, accidents, fevers, and violent deaths. And at the time, I also said that Mars is out of bounds until the 24th of May. So isn't it interesting that obviously in the first quarter, we have had violence and issues happening in Israel and all over the world, really. That's not going to go away.
Yeah.
But the cards, if you look, the cards are quite, like cruel. I mean, Mars in Gemini is called despair and cruelty. That's basically got the swords going through her. So it's pretty violent. But it's interesting, isn't it, that now the nodes are at this point? Yeah, so just thought I'd bring that in as well, because it's amazing. I think this
Just
sort of
at that equinox, I remember noticing also that Venus and the Sun went through Israel.
that's right.
At the equinox. So yeah, highlight for the year, of course, as well. So may peace rain down on them.
Yeah, that's for sure.
For longer,
So
for more,
I
forever.
think that's all for today. That's it.
Wow. Thank you, Olga. Oh my goodness. How
Yeah.
amazing is that?
Yeah.
Everyone's saying thank you, Olga, for your expertise, of course. I do think you need to do us a CIA cosmobiology class. Yeah?
Yeah. How do I get rid of this? Stop my screen?
Stop share. I can remove it.
Okay.
I've got the
That's
power
better.
to remove. Well, I hope you like that, everyone. Lots of information there from Olga, but you can see how, again, the levels of astrology are just so important to understand instead of just blurting out, stuff that's going to happen or what have you, and really good reasons to want to know more, isn't it? To really study this incredible connection to the cosmos.
Well, if you want to learn midpoints, we'll do something. Whenever you want to do something, we'll do a course, a little webinar or something on it. Or
yeah. We'll talk about that later, but we'll book Olga in again, maybe in the next 2 months or something for that, because I do know that that's one we'd love to have in our library in that sense as well, Olga. So
okay.
Yeah, lots of people just saying thank you. Let me just read through some of the people asking for your handle.
Astrogan 33.
Yeah, I posted that in there. There was a really interesting comment from before, someone from a Maori origin from New Zealand saying that their Maori year starts with this eclipse, which I just found really interesting. But our culture starts the new year at this time called Matariki. I would say so to do the Aboriginal whānau have connections at this time. I'd love to know more about that. But yeah, anyway, everyone, I hope you enjoyed that. The incredible power of eclipses. No need to get too concerned, although Olga's mundane sort of outlooks are somewhat alerting, of course, but on a personal level. But that's how it goes. I mean, you study the cycles, you look at patterns, you can see them coming up in the same areas and about the same things. Yeah. So Olga, thank you so much for your, again, expertise and what you put together for us today. And we're going to do something in 2 weeks again on the solar eclipse. Yeah. A lot more insights into 19 degrees Gemini solar eclipse, which will be the last of this season. So I hope you can join us then, everyone. Do join the CIA if you want to put your astrology to the next level, or just follow us in all the certain streams that you're seeing us on here. And thank you. Have a happy, prosperous, and let's say positively eventful eclipse. See you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.